Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you enjoyed the second day of this really thrilling conference. And if I see how full the audience is still at this time of the day, and it's plain sunshine outside, then I think you got really hooked with the topic, and you got really interested and had a lot of fruitful discussions during the last during the last hours, during the last day. Our panel discussion this night will deal with the multifunctionality of landscapes. And I think if you follow the sessions closely, we have a lot of ideas how to tackle this issue with methods. So what kind of research is behind quantifying this kind of functions of different landscape functionalities, how we can do that. But there's also still a huge gap in implementing these kind of approaches into government issues, governance issues, for example. And also when we look into the conference topics, we still discover that in some cases we still have this separation in our head. So we deal with SDGs, but we deal not with all the SDGs at the same time, or we deal with SDGs concerning water and not concerning soil, or the other way around. We heard from Luca Montaranella this morning that in some SDGs, for example, for water quality, soil is not even mentioned as a transformator. So there are plenty of points where we still have to open our minds more to the Nexus idea, I think, where we have to work more on the interfaces, really seeing the whole problem and not only part of it. Also, I appreciated in the morning very much the keynote talk mentioning that, of course, if you do a natural science system analysis, you should have regional planners, you should have economic people also having this side of the coin included to have a complete analysis of the problem and to understand really what are the triggers of the system. And I think there is still a lot of work to do in terms of these issues. What we also discussed yesterday intensively is that, of course, we have the two nice banners. We have the city implementation, the urban problems, and we have the multifunctional landscapes. But landscapes and urban areas are the same. Urban areas are a crucial part of a landscape, and metafluxes between urban areas and rural areas determine really a lot of the system. So food going in, waste going out, energy going in, and so on, wastewater going out. So I think also, of course, the conference was structured as such, but in our minds, when we tackle really multifunctionality, urban areas and landscapes belong deeply together because matter flow, water flow are closely linked. So I think there is still a lot of things to do. Let me introduce our panelists for this evening session. We have three example or case studies which we will have presenters from China, from Vietnam, and from Kenya. And we have two expert commenters in the same format as we had yesterday. So we will have Dr. Wang from the Chinese Academy of Forestry, who has a long-standing cooperation with Germany. I met him, I think, the first time in 2006 at a conference here in Dresden, and I know that he is deeply involved into land use and multifunctionality also of forest systems. Then we will have Dr. Hai from Vietnam, from the Institute of Urban and Rural Planning, where he is the General Director. And then we will have a talk from Kenya, from Dr. John Gathenya, from the Kenyatta University, who will work on the ecosystem service assessment. Who will work on creating incentives to implement concepts of the Nexus solutions. And then we will have two expert speakers. We will have Dr. Rattan Lal. I think I do not really have to introduce him because everybody who has worked ever on soils or soil conservation will know what kind of outstanding person he is and what kind of outstanding achievements he has built during his career. So whenever there is a question on soil erosion, on soil conservation, on carbon sequestration, he is the first person I would ever go to if there's a pressing problem. So I'm very happy that you are part of this panel. And then we have a second expert on the panel, where I'm also very grateful that we have the Deputy Secretary General of the Ramsar Convention, Dr. Ania Grobicki, yeah, Grobicki. I'm still stumbling with the names, I'm very sorry. And she has also a vast experience, not only on wetland conservation, but also on water issues. And she will also for sure have important points to make here in the multifunctionality landscape panel. So to keep my comments short, I will give the floor already to the first speaker, and I will call Dr. Wang to the floor to give the first presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to be here to have the chance. Let me share with you the summary report in a case studies within 8 minutes to summarize our long-term research result. I come from China, Chinese Academy of Forestry. My presentation is a multifunctional approach to balance the impact of soil erosion control and water yield reduction by large-scale afforestation in the dry, loess plateau areas in northwest China. Okay. First of all, we see what problem we have. It may be a nexus problem because, first of all, we have a vast area in dryland in the worldwide. In the dryland, we have scale of water resource. We have very low forest vegetation cover, and this causes the serious water loss and soil erosion. This limits the food production. This limits the regional development. After some research, we think that forest or increased forest can solve this problem. Therefore, especially in the loess plateau areas in China, we encourage massive afforestation. For example, you can see in the last 20 years, increased forest vegetation cover really a lot. But this reduces the farmland, reduce the water for the downstreams because forests use much more water than other vegetations. So in the dry areas, this will limit the regional development. So we want to solve the problem, but sometimes we miss new problems. This indicates the limitation of a single-purpose land use or single-purpose afforestation. Therefore, we need a nexus approach or nexus solution, not only approach. What I want to show you is related with land, water, climate, and also food with the sustainable development goals. Then talking about the key challenge. To solve this, we have a key challenge. In theory, is how does forest and water interact with each other. In practice, how to balance the competing service demand through a water-saving and multifunctional forest planning, also forest management. For this, we did our research in northwest China for nearly 20 years. So the key word for our research, first is structure, the standard structure. Second is pattern, is spatial distribution of forest. Then third is the process, ecological hydrologic process to understand the mechanisms. And also the coupling, different pieces of knowledge, different pieces of process, how they linked with each other. Then scaling. These are the 5 keywords we followed. Then we try to develop the theory, also the techniques to balance the forest-water competition. Then we talk about very shortly about the solutions. The principles is an integrated forest-water soil management. This is the purpose. The principles, firstly, it must be based on the water carrying capacity. This means not only all the precipitation will be used, but also you should consider we need a water supply for downstream, for the local people. So with these principles, we should answer first how much forest you can develop in dry areas. The second is where to locate the forest. The third is what quantity forest. This means the proper stand structures, like leaf area index, like tree density, like species compensations. Then the third principle is the full use of the ecosystem service of each piece of land. So we try to follow this and give the possible technical solutions how to realize this. First, for example, how to decide the forest cover in basins. For example, we developed the curves, this potential forest cover variation with annual precision. You can estimate how much maximal forest cover can be developed. We also did some statistical research. With a simple regression, you can calculate how much forest is allowed if you want to keep certain water yield. We also developed some decision tools based on the distributed hydrologic models, SWIM. Some people know this is similar with SWOT. You can calculate how, with increasing forest area or with increasing forest leaf area index, how the annual water yield changing, or the high flow, the base flow changing. With these relations, you can make decisions where to a forest, how much, and what kind of forest to be this. We also gave some suggestions to make the multifunctional forest stand management. First of all, that you should classify the site classifications. Then the second, you should give the order of the priority of the main functions. First function is that, second is that what, the third is what, give the order. The third step is the monitoring and the quantification of the stand, because the stand structure is closely related with the functions. Then fourth step is the diagnosis of the stand structure by compare with the ideal one, with the service people wanted, the diagnosis process. After the diagnosis, you know what mistakes, what not good is. Then you can make a plan. This plan is a structure-oriented or function-oriented management planning. There's 5 steps. Then the following, this picture show you examples. This just a picture, but it's more than 10 students work together for this. You show every line is a function, how it changed with increasing tree densities. For example, the water yield decreased with increasing tree densities. The carbon increased, then stabilized. The timber always increased. The biodiversity, the first increased, then decreased. So each function needs each proper tree densities. How to balance this? If you want more water, maybe sparse forest. If more carbon, more timber, more dense forest. So we suggest maybe in this area, so 1,200 trees per hectare. Maybe this. But this is not based on the money evaluation. It's more experience. Just to show this, the difficulties to get the multifunctional decisions. You need a lot of research. We also developed a more general structure, ideal structures. It's example, simple, just 3 times 0.7 plus x. What's this? First, the soil cover must be higher than 70% to reduce the possible soil erosion. The second is the economic density. It should be around 0.7, not higher than 0.8, not lower than 0.6, to promote the natural regeneration, but meantime to control the width, to get the balance. Then the last is a ratio between tree height in meter and tree DPH in centimeters. It should be below 0.7 to keep the forest habitability against the snow damage, wind damage. This is more principle, more general, the ideal stand structures. If you get more other functions, maybe you need other principles. For example, if you want to get big dimension timber like what in Europe did in close to nature forestry, you can add other principles. If you want more water, maybe you get other principles. But in general, the 3 times 0.7 is a general ideal stand structures. The time is limited, so I cannot within 8 minutes to talk about the 20 years research for whole group. So for more details, you can visit this book. We launched this book. It's very more detailed. Also, one journal papers we published 2 years ago about the multifunctional management in standard level. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, we come from Vietnam Institute for Urban and Rural Planning. We call the short name the VIUP, or not VIP, VIUP. Yeah. Okay, so I come here as the role of the urban planner. We're working with IOER, yeah, for the Marx project. So you can see the Marx project in exhibition downstairs here. Okay, so now we just talk about how to manage the mineral resource for the one area in Hoa Binh province. But this map I show you is the whole Hanoi metropolitan region planning with the 9 provinces surrounding Hanoi capital here. Okay, so now our government give us one project, big project about regional planning for Greater Hanoi. Because after we did the Hanoi master plan, okay, our prime minister will give us, okay, we should manage the city, the Hanoi. More than 10 million people live in Hanoi. So Hanoi became the mega city. So we should think about how to manage the mega city. We think about metropolitan planning. Okay, so I show you that the concept of the integrated planning for the greater region, Hanoi. Yes. This year, our prime minister was approved this regional planning. So the idea comes from the French consultant with the national consultant with us, yeah, to give the idea about the Hanoi, greater region Hanoi became the integrated metropolitan. Integrated metropolitan means no boundary for development between the province and the Hanoi city. Try to, we don't care about the boundary, administrative boundary between the province to make a more flexible, more control in the region, not in each province. The idea about Hanoi now in the next 20 years, nearly the 20 million people live in this region. It's a huge, big, like a Seoul, yeah, the region like a Seoul now, more than 20 million live there. So we try to write a vision here, but the vision for the capital, metropolitan of each country, so the role of the region became more important because the function of the metropolitan became here. So here I show you one of the picture. This area is now the most attractive investor, foreign investor or even domestic investor, to put money there. So the demand from the construction material is very high, very, very high, because the Nội Bài Airport, the upstairs, come to the center with the new bridge, is sponsored by Japan government. Then this highway became very charming, very attractive for the new development in the north of Hanoi. So we need many cement, the brick, and also the glass and steel, many things. Where is the construction material come from? So we think one of the area is the Marek project area. They exploit the limestone hill to get the stone for construction. Yeah, not far from Hanoi, just only 60 or 50 kilometers. Then they can bring that construction following the Hong River, yeah, because it's very cheap. You come to the Hanoi River region. Then you can see the mountain, beautiful mountain, now became like a bombing, yeah, the bombing. So the problem now, how to change the soil structure and also the water flow regime and pollution of air and water. And also we need to think about the adversary to conservation objective. So the Mareks come to this area to help Hòa Bình province, to help some entrepreneurs to manage with the sustainable the exploit of the stone mine, the mountain. Yeah, so this picture brings to us, after post-mining, we have to recultivate. It's our law. But in fact, after you use the 5% for the recultivate, so we need to manage and also how to come back the natural original natural before, because now they became no hill anymore, no limestone anymore, but became maybe the lake. So different situation. Then the idea here, how to contribute to the development of the solution for the post-mining planning. So relation to SDG, yeah. And also based on the review of the environmental performance of the certified quarry in Leung Sơn. Yeah, you can see Leung Sơn here, many the quarry, yeah, more than 35. And also we detailed assessment of 5, the priority 5 quarry. And the last, we cooperate interview with the local expert, yeah, like us. So the last slide, the question, how to integrate the spatial and environmental planning. That's a question from many experts. In Vietnam, you can talk environment with the Ministry of Environment. If you can talk about the spatial planning, you can talk with Ministry of Construction. So different ministry. So how to bring together the idea we can integrate it, spatial and environmental planning into one. Then very important now, we have the new law about the planning law. In that planning law, we try to bring together how to manage, because the province has only the chairman of province, but many ministries come manage. So the chairman of province don't know how to cooperate with many ministries on his head. So now that we have the planning law, try to bring the chairman with the many the sectoral, the field. The second question, how to make the best solution for the post-mining plan. Now we talk about the post-mining, but in our idea, we talk about the pre-mining planning. Before you do the exploiting, you should make a plan first. Because if we have a good plan for the next 10 years, for the 12 or for the 20 years, next 20 years, okay, we will bring investor in to carry investment, and also some management and community. They can, based on planning, pre and post mining, they can save money, and also they can protect our environment. Before you dig stone, before you booming the old hill. So our question, okay, how to prepare the pre- and post-mining planning. And the last, not the least, I give you the two examples. In the south of Vietnam, that area is the same with the Hoa Binh. We have many, many beautiful limestone hills. But after they take a lot of stone here for construction, that area became a very dangerous area, like a big lake, very deep lake. Then deep lake, very dangerous. The children and also the young people come here for swimming. Then they die, they die because there's no protection. Then our province authority decided, okay, we will use this area for the park. Then they put the money, the investor come, they put the money, that became the beautiful park. With the park, we have the bodyguard. We have the protect. Yeah. Then now became the very peaceful. The second example in Halong Bay, if somebody here can visit Halong Bay, is a natural heritage, very beautiful. The sea and also limestone, yes, beautiful area. But in the top of hill, many the coal mine, big coal mine in Vietnam. So now the people try to take coal for export. Then the idea, when they take many coal mine here, and then they can use that area for recultivate for corn crop. Okay, so if the investor for corn crop cooperate with some company, exploit company, okay, we can do cheaper and also we can contribute for the environmental protection. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Hai, for this impressive example. Also, what kind of impact mining has on landscapes and the interaction of rural and urban planning became very clear, I think. We move on to the next speaker, which comes from Kenya. So we move also to another continent, to Africa. And Dr. Kenyatta will talk about the incentives, how to really reach the implementation of sustainable management.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm talking about a project on payment for ecosystem services in a very small catchment in Kenya that was meant to promote sustainable land management. This watershed is in Kenya. Those of you who don't know Kenya, you can see where it is located in Africa. And we are in central Kenya. And this area is mainly agricultural, as you can see, but we also have a section of it under forest, managed by the Kenya Forestry Service, and the park, managed by the Kenya Wildlife Service. So it has multiple functions. We have people who are dependent on agriculture. We have also other functions. But one of the big challenges is that one of the reservoirs that takes water to Nairobi is getting its water from this catchment, and sometimes during the rains, especially, the water quality is highly, having a lot of sediment load. We see the two reservoirs that supply water to Nairobi. So this is the smaller one, 60 million cubic meters, but nevertheless significant, supplying 15% of the water to Nairobi. Here we see the location of the catchment up in the hills. The distance to Nairobi, 40 kilometers. Nairobi is the hub of Kenya's economy, and of course, Nairobi water generates a lot of revenue from the water sales from this area. It gets 64,000 cubic meters of water per day from this specific catchment. And just to consider the Nexus approach, this landscape provides food it provides fodder, it provides wood fuel to the people who live there. But we see that also the human activities on this landscape affects water quality, especially increasing the sediment load and also affecting the regulation of the flows to Nairobi. So the concept of PES, as we see it here, is to give incentives to people who own land upstream so that they can implement sustainable land management practices that provide water-related ecosystem services. In particular here, we are talking about low suspended sediment load and regulated flows to the reservoir. So we have, we talked about this multifunctional catchment. We have talked about the links between agriculture and ecosystem services, quite obvious. There's a government project that was started to pilot this PES project, has been running from 2015 and 2016. And the idea was to promote SLM practices that deliver ecosystem services, but not only environmental goals. We have also the goal of increasing food production and household income, as well as water quality. So it touches on a number of SDGs, on poverty, but perhaps also on hunger, which are quite connected, especially in communities that rely on agriculture, on water, on sustainable cities, and on land degradation, especially SDG number 15. The setup of this space structure was like this. On the left, we have the landowners who are grouped in terms of the common interest groups. Common interest groups are farmers who have a specific interest. Maybe they have horticulture, or they have dairy, or they have natural resource management as their objective, so that they can receive specific inputs. And so the farmers were aggregated into a water resource user association, which is a legal group that is recognized within the water law in Kenya. And on the other side, on the extreme end, we have the water users, who are maybe approximately 600,000 people from who live in Nairobi. We have a city with 4 million, so 15% of them comes to about 600,000. Those are the beneficiaries. And of course, the water company should be the one representing these users, but here we have the government who was representing the users as the buyer. And in the middle, we have the intermediary. We have CAP SLM project, which was a government project within the Ministry of Environment. And we have our university also playing the role of research, and we have other consultants who did some work to guide this process. And in between, you have a contract between the buyer and the seller that specified what needs to be done by each of the farmers. So here we see the farmers. Each of them had what is called a land management plan that specified how many terraces, how many trees, what needs to be done on each specific farm, and together in totality, they were aggregated into micro-catchments, 4 of them, and now the whole catchment. So the intermediary role was to create awareness between the buyers and the sellers, because this was a new concept, to make the farmers understand how they can sell ecosystem services, and also to facilitate the contract between the RUA and the government, the Water Resource User Association and the government. The intermediaries also played the role of appointing and supervising service providers. These service providers are extension service agents, but from private sector, who were supposed to help the farmers develop the land management plans, but also implement them and monitor how this was happening. Then the government, through the CAP SLM project, was providing inputs. These inputs included grass for planting, all implements for working on the farm, and fertilizer and things like that. But they also got cash depending on where they were in terms of implementation. There were also studies that were connected with this project to support this process, and also to ensure that we draw lessons from it. One study was on situation analysis, policy and institution analysis, cost-benefit analysis, and another study that used modeling approaches like the ones mentioned in the Chinese studies, using SWOT to look at the impact of this implementation of these SLM practices on water quality. So after 1 year, we see, we monitored and we see that some of the activities that the farmers were supposed to implement included planting grass strips, and we see that the farmers had gone up to about 60%, and we have terraces, we have a number of forest trees, and retention dishes, and grass splits, and fruit trees. So when you look at all this, you see that planting forest trees as well as fruit trees also served not only to provide income to the people, but also to reduce the pressure on the interface between the land, the managed land, and the forest, because initially farmers kept on going into the forest to get trees. So this approach helped them to release the pressure on the forest so that they can get wood fuel and other forestry needs from their farms. 1,000 farmers engaged with the PS project within 1 year voluntarily, and out of the about 5,000 households that are located in this place. And we had also, we checked with we modeled the place, and we saw that based on erosion modeling and a few measurements, not very comprehensive, 22% of the LMPs that were implemented up to that time, so the implementation could result in 22% reduction in sediment yields into the reservoir. So monitoring of the progress was good, but mainly the monitoring, I would like to say that we monitored mainly the implementation, which was very easy, but the water quality aspects, I would say, still is not very strong. What we learned, there were many lessons learned, but one of the things that I would like to highlight is that we had 2 arms of this catchment, one arm with the soils that are very deep and highly permeable. In another site, we had soils that are not so permeable. And we see that the impact you get from implementing the soil conservation practices differs depending on which site you are locating. Of course, we had done hotspot analysis to see which areas have what levels of erosion rates, but the impact of implementation varies depending on which areas you target. And it is important to understand the differences between the soils as one delivers the impact. Of course, when you're dealing with farmers, you cannot differentiate, you cannot prioritize farmers who are necessarily in areas that are more impactful than the others. When they come to the PEST project, all of them were freely coming. You cannot say your place is not a hotspot, don't come. So that was not the issue. So some of the lessons we learned is that PES can be a vehicle to enhance adoption of SLM practices and hence watershed services provision. And it is important to understand the soil and water and land use interactions, but also important to understand the socioeconomic dimensions that influence the uptake of these SLM practices. And it is important to align the policy and institutional arrangements so that this PS approach can operate well. And this is one of the things that has happened in our country. We have been able at least to make sure that we mainstream this PS project in the planning and in the policy sector within the Ministry of Environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this really excellent talk, showing also how it's possible to create incentives even if the problem is created in one area and the impact is in another one. So I think it's really an excellent example how to create incentives. Now I would ask all presenters and our expert commenters please come to the floor so that we can have a discussion here on the floor. So first I would like to ask our expert commenters for their comments. Professor Rattan Lal, would you be the first to give your comments, please?
Reza and colleagues, your team, congratulations. You have raised the bar for your 2019 conference very high already, and I'm sure you'll succeed. I also want to congratulate our 3 presenters. They did an outstanding job, excellent research results. I have some comments concerning the Nexus approach in the research in China, Vietnam, and in Kenya. And I want to show you an example of what I'm looking for. This morning, excellent presentation by Rabi. Fuel, energy, waste, and we got soil somewhere in there in between to look at the concept, because otherwise the nexus is incomplete. We also got water. I think that got duplicated. So material fluxes, that was supposed to be water and energy and so forth. But what I'm trying to say is somewhere the soil on which water, food, and energy depend cannot be ignored. If you ignore, something is going to happen later. And let me give you an example from China, for example. We have modified water balance equation using trees. So the project is a tree-centric, not soil-centric. And yet the water balance equation, evapotranspiration, precipitation, irrigation, runoff, change in soil water storage, deep drainage, they all depend upon soil. For example, soil water storage. What I read, I've been told it has been assessed, but what I read and what I saw was not mentioned. If that is not mentioned, the runoff part is the only one that's modified. Evapotranspiration is modified also by crop residue mulch on the soil surface or by structure. So involvement of those components have to have a nexus concept that I was looking for. So multifunctional landscape with forest on a sandy soil, maybe grasses in the valleys and footstove to be used as a mulch and compost is important concept, a very important for future thing to look at. Now, let's look at the relation between soil moisture characteristics. As a doctor, if somebody was to tell me what is your stethoscope for soil, it's the PF curve. Okay, PF curve is metric potential versus moisture content. A good structured soil with a high organic matter content will have an inflection point where the curve changes from positive to negative. A lush sandy soil which does not have organic matter content has no inflection point. The difference between the two, especially in the lower side to the right, is the soil water storage capacity. It's based on the retention porosity. You got porosity, which is total, retention pore, transmission pore, and residual pore. And by looking at those curves throughout the depth, you can see what is missing. And that nexus connection and interconnectivity was missing. Now, let's look at the universal sediment laws. Yes, sediment load was checked. Yes, the universal soil loss equation was used. A, erosion, equal to R, erosivity, K, erodibility, L, slope length, S, slope steepness, C and P. C and P were impacted by forest, but K was not. K is a soil erodibility factor that depends on soil organic carbon content. And the project has to be soil-centric to be long-term effective. It's not a criticism. It's important to change, even now with emphasis going in that direction. Otherwise, the vegetation cover alone is not a solution to the problem. So afforestation addressed the C and P, but not K. Now, we are trying to change water. We did change water in the Yellow River. In fact, the runoff changed completely. But changing water and not monitoring what happened to carbon with it, or to nitrogen with it, or to phosphorus with it, or sulfur, without looking at that water alone, you disturb the other component but not monitored. Therefore, the ecosystem services generated by the connectivity of all those got not monitored. Food scarcity became an issue, and will continue to become an issue. So we got to, in nature, when you try to pick up water, without picking up carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, it's not possible. You got a problem. And that's the nexus. That's where the nexus concept comes in. Now I want to come back to the Kenya. They talk about payment for ecosystem services very nicely, but there was a problem. The problem is payment is not a subsidy. I want to repeat that, especially to the colleagues in World Bank. Payment for ecosystem services is not a subsidy. It's not a handout. It's not a charity. It is money delivered for the services rendered. If the services are rendered, make sure the payment is made on a societal value and not on economic value. Economic value is myopic. Societal value is the long-term part. And if the societal value is undervalued, then the natural resource suffers from the tragedy of the commons. And we do not want to happen that. And this is where the concept of nexus, for which this conference is based, is important. Here's another reason why the undervalue was. We are trying to convert organic matter straw into humus. Well, the straw has a CN ratio of 100, humus has 12. Straw has a CN ratio of 200, humus has 50. Straw has a CS ratio of 500. So humus has a higher nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, in addition to carbon. Somebody got to pay for it. And if it's not paid for, nobody is going to achieve cathode per mil or whatever else is. It's all carbon will never be sequestered. So the payments to farmer for any ecosystem services must be calculated on the resources consumed and used by the farmers. These are suggestions for future. What you have done in the past is commendable, and I salute you.
Thank you, Professor Lal, for these in-depth comments. Would you like to respond, Professor Wang, to the change of the water balance equation and the universal soils equation?
Okay, I fully agree with you. I think that when you talk of the ecosystem, so forest, grass, shrubs, it's just one part of the ecosystem. The function is an integrated result of climate, topography, soil, vegetation. When we talk about vegetation, not just vegetation type, I mentioned the structure, the same tree, the same forest, if you have different structures, maybe different functions. So we should know how the service is formed under the climate, topography, soil, vegetation. Then you can have the chance to manage the ecosystem service, not only calculate, evaluate the service. We need to manage the service because the service supply is from nature. The service demand is from society. Also, the service demand is also site to site different. This day and that day different. So always dynamic. We need, like you said, we need an evaluation, we need a calculation, we need a scientific-based payment for service. Also in China, we have some project from state to want to give the money to the farmers, but it is just simply estimation. Sometimes if your calculation is not totally 100%, maybe you want to promote them to something, but sometimes maybe failed because you're not scientific based. I totally agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. Dr. Gathenya, do you want to comment on the payment of societal value and the success control of incentives?
Yeah.
There's a mic.
Yeah, thank you very much. I much appreciate. Let me clarify what was done in Sasumwa. The farmers were compensated based on the labor cost of whatever they did. If they did 10 meters of terraces and it costed X, then they were paid X out of 3. So it was cost sharing. Of course, there is a problem there because the impact of one practice, even on the ecosystem service, is not the same. You need to find out if you have to pay what is the impact of, for example, 10 trees, 10 meters of terrace. It's not the same on the ecosystem services. So we need to go to that level where we are valuing the paying according to the impact that we want, which we didn't do, and which was one of the shortcomings of this approach. But it was a starting point, and we'd like to build on it. The other thing is, we monitored water balance, and it's very important, as you said, to monitor the changes in the soil and the impact on the ecosystem services. One of the things that was clear from our studies and even from the modeling is that you get almost as much impact if you use non-structural measures to manage the runoff than if you use the agronomic and soil-based approaches. That is very clear. If you work on the soil organic matter so that you get more water infiltrating, you get almost the same impact as if you put terraces. But the thing is, of course, that when you work on the organic matter, the benefits are more long-term. You get more benefits also from the yields. And I think this is what we should follow, that you enrich the soil more than you put these structures all over to manage the runoff. So you actually manage the runoff at the point it happens, before you start managing it as it runs down the slope. So that is very clear. And I think there is room for more research, especially on the fertility, soil fertility, the role of organic matter, the role of physical properties of the soil, like porosity, like back density changes, that result from soil improvements from organic matter content. There is room for follow-up on these ideas.
Thank you very much. So Dr. Hai, do you also want to comment?
Okay, just I have a very small and quick comment about the water supply. Yeah, because we are the city planners, so we need to talk about how to keep the water in our city. It's very important because in forest, we can keep the water easier than in urban area. So I suggest, maybe in urban area, we should make a city become the greener, and also to use some recycling the water. Yeah, because after we make a clean the wastewater, we should reuse that for some kind of the service, like the water for clean the street, or the water for some another service of the city, but without the drinking water. Yeah, so I suggest maybe you should use the solution how to keep the water raining, or also the water from river, the clean river inside the city. Yeah, more greener, more the soil is more and grass more. Yeah, because now totally is concrete and cement. Okay, just a very quick comment.
Thank you very much. Then we would move on to our second expert and would hear your comments, please, Mr. Grobicki.
Thank you very much. And I would really like to say a big thank you to UNU-FLORES for inviting me here for this excellent conference. This is my first conference of the Water, Soil and Waste Nexus. I have been at the other ones about the Water, Food, Energy Nexus. And I have to say that I have been so impressed by the standard, the quality of the presentations, the passion, the commitment that I see from everyone in this room. And it really gives me hope for the future, that there are so many solutions being dreamt up in so many different fields, responding to so many of the SDGs. So really a big thank you to everyone, and especially to our three presenters today for their excellent presentations. So I have 3 points that I'd like to make really on the implementation side, because that's what I was asked to think about. And so what I would like to say to start off with is that I do believe the complex problems that we face today with a very rapid rate of change require complex and integrated solutions. And we are seeing some of these solutions being proposed. But I really still feel that we are in our infancy when we talk about being able to manage ecosystem services. I just believe that the tools that we have, the level of our analysis, is not yet up to the level required to really be able to manage ecosystems that have been disturbed, that have been recreated or restored, or in fact have been created to be quite different to perhaps what was there before. I think this science is in its infancy, and it's certainly extremely complex. But having said that, I think what the case studies this afternoon really have illustrated is how case studies can be transformed into solutions and policy recommendations. Solutions can be natural solutions, they can be technical solutions, or they can be a combination of the two. And I think what is needed more than anything else is really to start to convey to policymakers and to many, many people out there that in fact these solutions exist. And in other words, to build the science policy interface, to transform these case studies into solutions, to illustrate the incentives. And I would like to suggest, perhaps for future conferences, that every case study, the scientist is paired by somebody who might ultimately end up using that research and who could draw out the policy recommendations. In other words, to create a sort of dialogue between the scientist and the user of the science, and to structure sessions in that way so that we can all start to understand a bit better the steps that are needed actually to transform scientific research and evidence into concrete ideas and solutions that can be implemented. So that was just one suggestion in terms of the conference itself. Now, as I was saying that, and as we all know very well, the pace of change in all areas and in all aspects of resource use is very rapid, and it's increasing. The rate of climate change, the rate of hydrological change, the anthropogenic changes and resource uses, all of these indicators, you know, we're on an exponential slope that we're talking about. And so, indeed, I'm concerned that the rate of change of transfer of the solutions, or from the research into solutions and policy recommendations, is too slow. We need to find ways to actually speed up that rate of transfer. And what I'm seeing is something that, as a water person that's tried to work in a multidisciplinary way for many years, and worked with the soil colleagues and land colleagues in the past, and certainly now working together with them very closely in terms of ecosystem management. I still see really some divisions and some boundaries in thinking that if they were removed or lowered, would speed up this rate of change of science to policy that we're talking about. And just a very concrete example of this is that a lot of the discussions around soil and about sustainable land management, about land use planning, the reference point is still always administrative boundaries. A very quick way, I think, of being able to speed up the transfer of ideas to the water community is also to take into account the hydrological boundaries. And whatever ideas you have around land use planning, whatever you're trying to convey, if you could also translate it straight away into hydrological boundaries, to be able to talk more effectively with one's water colleagues. One example of that, I was very impressed by a target that apparently has been set in Germany for the re-wetting of peatlands, which is an excellent idea, but that was proposed on the basis of administrative boundaries, as far as I could see, whereas, of course, the re-wetting of peatlands will also have big hydrological implications. But an excellent solution, don't get me wrong. And I'd like to know if, in fact, this aspect has been dealt with. And my third point that I'd like to make, thank you to our two keynote speakers this morning for setting out the SDG landscape so clearly for us. And we have talked about many of the SDGs in the conference. But we've been talking a lot about terrestrial land use change. I'd like to just emphasize, though, that everything that happens on the continents has an impact on the coastal zone and has an impact on the marine environment. And when we're talking, for instance, about sediments, soil erosion, these can be positive or negative impacts on the coastal zones and the marine environment. Many deltas currently are dying for lack of sediments because they're being retained upstream, as an example. But of course, there are the negative examples of the nutrient loads, the phosphorus that gets swept down into marine environments and causes nutrient overloading. And then, of course, the big issue of plastics, which at the moment it's the poor marine scientists who are left carrying the burden of trying to report to the rest of us the impact that these plastics are having on the marine environment. But they all originate on the continents and in the terrestrial areas, in the catchments, in cities. So this is a plea that we introduce also SDG 14 into our Nexus thinking, and that perhaps when one's considering the nexus of water, soil, and waste, I would love to see some more emphasis being placed to respond to the absolute crisis of plastics that are overwhelming our oceans and our ocean ecosystems. So with that, I think I've ranged rather far and wide beyond the three presenters that we had this afternoon. But as I said, I think both of these three presentations actually illustrated extremely well, in fact, the science policy interface, how to generate solutions, and how to translate those into reality. So I can make some more comments on that later, but let me stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you again for these really excellent comments and also for spreading a bit of wider umbrella to the topic. For the three presenters, would you like to comment on how to transfer the case studies really to solutions? Do you have ideas how this could become lighthouses for the implementation, for finding solutions? Because as we heard, we really have to speed up. And I completely agree that the processes of change are very, very fast. So who wants to comment first? Would you like to do that?
Yeah, maybe it is the science to action, because I don't know whether policy is really action. For us, I think, okay, we were piloting something, and as I said, we started with very good ideas about how pests should work, because Sasumo was a catchment where there was an obvious buyer, that is the Nairobi City Water Company, and there was an obvious seller, the landowners, who were already organized into a community organization. But when we did the feasibility studies for PES, and we looked at all the things that are needed, and we tried to sensitize the buyer, that is the Nairobi Water Company, they could not engage directly at that time because there were some handles in terms of policy, the institutional setup that needed to be ironed out before they could engage freely. So actually, they did not engage. So the next person to engage, of course, would be government on behalf of the Nairobi Water Company, again to test this approach. But I would like to say the biggest challenge was to see how this can be scaled up, not only in Sasumo, but in bigger areas in Kenya. And one of the problems with PES is when you have a buyer, is to make sure that the buyer can be engaged over many years so that this process does not stop. It cannot be like a 5-year project. And many of the people who are doing business, maybe they have plans that span 5 years, and maybe after that they change their interests. So the continuity issue was really there. And what we have done now is that this Sasumo watershed has been swallowed up in a bigger project that is called the Upper Tana Water Fund. And this water fund is an initiative where the Nature Conservancy plus other players are investing a big amount of money, and this money is supposed to be invested so that the earnings from that investment support conservation work over many years. So it's a long-term plan, and what we are trying to do is to woo many investors to put money in the pot and to support a bigger landscape. So this smaller watershed is now within a bigger watershed where the electricity company is investing, Nairobi Water is investing, Kenya Breweries is investing, and all the Coca-Cola company is investing. The big people who have interest in water, put the money in the pot. Of course, there is a board that makes sure that the money is invested wisely. So in this way, we see the problem of continuity being solved, but also what I said is the fact that we worked so hard to make sure that PES is well articulated in the policy so that these bottlenecks that were there are no longer there. And now we see Nairobi Water Company engaged very squarely, but in even a bigger approach. Of course, we thank the Nature Conservancy for coming in and bringing the concept that is very widely practiced in South America and other places about the water fund, which is a more long-term impact. Hopefully, it will create better incentives for this conservation and of the environment to take place.
Thank you very much for commenting. Dr. Wang, would you be next? No.
Oh.
Yeah, Dr. Wang or Dr. Hai? Please, Dr. Wang.
Okay. I think that to foster the transformation, I think it's a duty not only scientists, it's only from government decision makers. I think it's an obligation for all. But everyone should do what he can do. For the scientists, we should think, do we have the technical solutions? Do we our sector or the disciplinary research is good enough? So we have obligations. We should find the technical solutions. Then we should to give the available techniques to the government or to the farmers. Otherwise, we cannot wait the government to make the technical solutions. But I think that we should also try to change the ideas, the thinking of the decision makers. I think we as scientists should take obligations. But maybe also the UN institutions, your transboundary, maybe you or the other NGO organizations, they should also try to make such ideas technical more popular, more faster. Also, maybe from UN, you ask some the government who have the money to support such research, not transdisciplinary research. Without research, without technical solutions, you cannot implement. But without such research, you cannot get the solutions. I think the government, the non-government institutions, the scientists, also universities, how to teach the students, all have the obligations. But maybe some people might Nexus, you think about who take what obligations in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. Dr. Hai, would you give a short statement?
Okay, so I totally agree with you about maybe the next Nexus conference. So we should talk more the solution, implementation. Okay, so next conference, yeah, I will bring the more solution and how to implement in practical. Try to remember me. Okay, I will come. Okay, yeah. Okay. So, but now that I think that we try to make the good platform, because the solution come from the local authority, solution come from researcher and planner, solution come from the business side, and also from the local people, and experience from the foreigner come for each country. So I think that. But how to make the good platform for them? If a solution comes from the people, local people, it's good, but not enough because of the money where it comes from. Yeah, the solution may be the best solution from the planner or researcher, but the investor, no, they said forget it. Yeah, so our idea, and also we're working with the Marek team. We try to create a better or transparency or effective platform. That's my comment. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Hai. I would like to open the floor also for the audience. So please, if there are questions, I see first fingers. Could you go to the mic, please?
Prasad Pradhan, Postdoc Institute for Climate Impact Research. So I have a question regarding this issue of afforestation and evapotranspiration, increasing evapotranspiration and as a result decreasing stream flow. But I think here one aspect has been ignored, and that is this moisture recycling function of the forest. So there is the moisture recycling going on due to evapotranspiration, which will be eventually coming back as rainfall. And the study shows that this moisture recycling aspect or flying river plays quite essential role in a landscape like Amazon. So maybe like one need to factor this in when we talk about like putting more forest may result in decreasing the stream flow, because this aspect is not so far reflected here. Thank you.
This is rainfall effect. I cannot fully answer your question, but I guess that maybe you talk about the water cycling, the forest effect in the water cycling. I think when we talk about this, you should think about the scaling problems. In some small scales, maybe in a village, we talk about the water yield reduction. It's for them a problem. Maybe you transport the water transport to anywhere as a rainfall, as the precipitation draw down. But for the small areas, they also need water in dry areas. I think that when for research, when we estimate how much water is reduced, but you cannot upscale it anywhere. So in small catchment get the result, you cannot use to big areas. I think the water balance is the principles, but the problem we are facing is related to the social demand. It's not natural water balance, water supply to support the development.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. We can take 2 more quick questions. Yes, please.
I think 3 very interesting studies where science has a real impact on society. Very clear illustrations there. And what is very fascinating is the discussion about ecosystem services and who should pay for it. And I would very much agree that the ecosystems provide services to society. So all of us benefit in different ways. So we should pay by taxes, for example. So the government pays, the example from Kenya. On the other hand, you can also argue that these water companies, when soil conservation is established, it means less silting of the reservoirs. So the reservoirs may last, well, 10 years longer than they would otherwise. That's a very high commercial advantage. The same goes for electricity companies and so on and so forth. So you can also argue they should pay for it, and then probably they would translate that to their customers who would pay more. So there is this basic question, who pays for it, and money makes the world turn around. So it's a crucial issue. And you alluded to that a little bit in the Kenya study, but how is that seen in the future? Is the payment, the government pays now, I understand, but how is that seen in the long run? Will that be shifted to the various groups, like the water companies and electricity companies and the customers, that they would pay for it? Or how is that framed? Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Three possibilities. People talk about tariffs, taxes, and transfers. So at the moment, as I said, when we started, we anticipated that the tariffs from the water sales in the water company in Nairobi should pay for the conservation in upstream catchments. But structurally in Kenya, every person who abstracts water pays a levy to a national institution called Water Resources Management Authority, whose mandate is not for a specific catchment, but spreads the money everywhere as it wills. So when we did the business case for Nairobi, it was obvious that an additional investment on top of what they already paid to the government could make a difference, even not only to the quality of the water, but also to the relations between them and the upstream landowners, because already there was a problem between upstream landowners and Nairobi Water Company, because they were saying, you take the water and you just come here and we have no relationship. So even for a good reputation, it was very important for them to establish that connection. But they didn't, because they were arguing, we are already paying this much money. And although there was a clear business case, it did not happen. But the Upper Tana Water Fund has kind of solved the problem, because there are now more big players who are putting money into the basket, and Nairobi Water Company was happy to join them. So initially it was not happy to come alone, but now when you put more people, Nairobi Water Company joins in now because it can see other players. But they still pay the levy to the government, but they have invested in the water fund because they see now that they have other people who have the same thinking. So actually that question is still there about who pays. But again, we must also ask ourselves, when government gets taxes, should it only invest in some specific catchments that deliver water maybe to Nairobi? And what about all the other catchments where water communities, small communities get water? So that somehow there has to be a balancing act that says you spread the benefits nationally, but also you focus on strategic catchments.
Thank you very much for the comment. Anybody else wants to comment for a final statement? Yeah, Professor Lau?
I have a comment concerning Vietnam's work on water supply that you addressed. You need more water for the city. I agree, but I just want to make a comment that the goal is to reduce, reuse, and recycle. I think that's a very important part, and I especially want to mention recycle in terms of the nutrients contained in the gray and black water, which is the city water. And a city of 10 million people consumes every day 6,000 tons of food, which has a lot of nutrients, especially phosphorus. Very difficult to find those. So the idea is to recycle that water to produce at least X percent, 15, 20% of the fresh food eaten in the city by recycling the resources within the city. So increasing water supply, yes, that's good, but let's reduce, they use and recycle it. Of course, golf course is not the best way to reduce water supply, water use, but reuse and recycle.
Thank you very much. I think with this I will also close the panel discussion, and I think I keep with the statement of Ania Grobicki that we have to speed up and yet that we have to find solutions. And maybe it's a good idea the next time really to team up with administration and case studies and see if we can speed up the solution process, the implementation of what we know so far. Thank you again for the excellent case studies. Thank you again for the two excellent commenters, for your broad view on the whole process. Thank you very much.